So amidst all the many flavours of Space Marines, it seems that we also have some Custodians datasheets escaping early. Let's take a look at some Custodian Guard with big rerolls and firing twice, a few choice nerfs for the Vertus Praetors, and some Custodian Wardens that seem to be all about being incredibly tanky these days. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking about some Custodians rules. This week very much seems to be 10th edition Index week, loads of new information and the full rules for just about every 40k army in the game. The Adeptus Custodes waiting patiently for their turn. It seems though that we've got a few datasheets escape confinement early. Some rather interesting details for the Custodian Guard, Blade Champion, Vertus Praetors and Custodian Wardens. The leak of these is basically 5 images that already seem to be circulating well online. Technically it's these 4 plus one of the Allarus Custodians as well, though we already know their profile from Games Workshop's Warhammer community article. We'll do a quick reminder at the end of the video. I'm certainly more interested in the datasheets than the source of these, though apparently the source was an accidental upload of an early video on YouTube somewhere. I haven't seen said video, apparently it was taken down already, and I've only seen the data card images. Big thank you to the person who sent me them on Discord while I was busy making Space Marine reviews. They absolutely are the Custodians data cards though, very clear photos, and they'll be along with the rest of the Custodians units on Wednesday or Thursday I presume. Obviously without the rest of the index and the points cost we don't really know all that much context, but still very interesting to see some teasers for some cool units. As mentioned, the data cards that seem to have leaked are the Custodian Guard, the Blade Champion, the Vertus Praetors and the Custodian Wardens. Really quite a nice selection of units to see. To be honest, pretty much the entire Games Workshop Custodians lineup really that's in plastic, aside from characters and the other flavours of Citizens of Silence and generic Space Marine things. Kicking off, and first up we have the Custodian Guard. The foot troops of the Adeptus Custodes have the keywords that you might expect: infantry and battle line, martial kata, and as Games Workshop teased, it does seem that all of the Custodes infantry at least can deploy from Golden Light via the Deep Strike mechanic, will likely make them a bit more flexible. I guess if Deep Strike Custodes, the Allarus actually have some competition now. Their Custodian stat line is decently chunky, certainly bigger and tankier than most Space Marines, movement of 6 inches, a toughness of 6 now, 2+ save and a 4+ invul, 3 wounds, leadership 6 and an objective control of 2. The toughness has been boosted from 5 to 6, much in the same way as Gravis Armor went to toughness 6 itself and Terminators went to toughness 5 and the Custodian Terminators went to toughness 7. I'd say maybe the objective control is a little bit on the underwhelming side for the core troops choice of the army. Currently in 9th edition they count as 2 models already and they also have objectives secured, which basically feels flatly superior to this, basically counting as 2 models at best. They can help it out with the banner, as we'll see in just a second, but without that they're not going to be quite as chunky on objectives as they perhaps used to be. I still feel that Leadership 6 is perhaps surprisingly low for Adeptus Custodes that were Leadership 11 in 9th as well. That's really Games Workshop committing to making Battle Shock relevant for every army, including the demigods that guard the Emperor. Weapons-wise, the Guardian Spear is the same profile as was revealed for the Allarus Terminators. It hits on a 2+, 5 attacks in combat with strength 7, AP-2 and damage 2. AP has often gone down across the board in 10th edition, but these guys have gained 2 extra attacks compared with their base of 3 that they had in 9th. Really quite a big glow up in terms of just how hard they can hit. At range, it strikes with 2 shots out to 24 inches, strength 4, AP-1 and damage 2. So again, a bit of a buff there. It doesn't need to be within 12-inch range for the 2-shot mode, plus they can even advance and shoot it happily as it's got the assault keyword. That's definitely going to be nice for Custodian Guard squads moving up the board. Getting an advanced roll and still shooting is pretty cool. The other option for the unit, of course, is to arm models with Sentinel Blades and the Presidium Shields, perhaps focusing a bit more on defense than raw damage. The Sentinel Blades are 5 attacks at strength 6, AP-2 and damage 1. They do feel like they've been toned down a bit in combat, as they're only damage 1 as opposed to damage 2, but again have more attacks than they used to. With its shooting, you get 2 shots but only out to 12 inches with the Sentinel Blade, otherwise it's kind of similar, it's assault, and also gets the pistol keyword as well, so you're allowed to fire it up close. The blade is paired with a Presidium Shield, which takes their wound characteristic up to 4, rather than giving them a +1 to their saves these days. Against something that'll be really nice, particularly any flat damage 3 weapons or damage 1. Against damage 2 though, it's often not going to have any major effect. I guess you'd have a choice as to whether you have an extra tanky Custodes unit or one that's extra dangerous with the Guardian Spears. I think I wouldn't be too surprised if they wound up costing the same, though if they did I think I'd be more tempted by the Guardian Spears, at least at first impression. It really does make the units truly dangerous. Finally, also listed on the datasheet is the Misericordia, which is strength 5, AP-2, damage 1, also 5 attacks, and I think that this one's only here because it will be relevant on the Vertus Praetor with the shield and the golden Vexilla. You could equip him both with the Custodian standard and the shield, and that would mean he would neither have a Guardian Spear nor a Sentinel Blade. Speaking of which, for equipment it looks like the Vexilla is +1 objective control per model, and it looks like it's a squad upgrade rather than an independent character. I guess it remains to be seen whether the Custodians will still have a Vexilla independent option. It might be following the same sort of way though that we've seen for things like the Blood Angel Sanguinary Guard. Previously they had an independent ancient model built from the squad, and it got rolled into the same unit, and you can't take it separately. Finally, the standard Custodian Guard get 2 special rules, not 1. Games Workshop did say in the preview that the Custodians units would double up, maybe partly due to how few models that you have on the battlefield, and also perhaps a slightly limited plastic range too. The standard Custodian Guard get a damage buff rule. They get one of the copies of that one that allows them to be better on objectives. They reroll wound rolls of 1 innately, both at range and in melee, and that goes up to rerolling all wound rolls if they target an enemy unit on an objective. If they can get that damage buff off with those Guardian Spears, they're going to be a threat to pretty much everything in the game. They'll be wounding the toughest vehicles around on a 5+. Rerolling the wound roll on average means that they should be wounding with most of those attacks. They're definitely going to be a threat to things like Imperial Knights. Finally, their second special rule is called Sentinel Storm. Once per battle, they can just casually shoot again with all of those auric weapons. I guess for a unit of 5, that'd be an extra 10 shots out of the Guardian Spears. Definitely not nothing when they're AP -1 and damage 2. They could leave a real mark on another enemy unit. Overall, I feel like the Custodian Guard have perhaps slanted a bit more from being more defensive specialists to more aggressive ones. Looks like their defensive profile is kind of similar, with only just the +1 toughness as Terminators got, but they have got significantly more dangerous at range and in melee, and their special rules really double down on that, never mind what they can do with that martial Qatar. Next up, we've got the Biker Custodians in the Vertus Praetors. Besides Forge World things, definitely some of the shock assault of the Custodians army now, moving around very fast and just being immensely dangerous all the way around. For keywords, they've got Mounted, Fly and Martial Qatar, and broadly for the rest of their datasheet, I feel like the general theme is they seem to have got a bit worse in terms of raw damage and defense. I wouldn't be too surprised to see that they might have gone down in points a bit. For their base stat line, they move 12 inches, a toughness 6, a 2+ save and a 4+ invul, 4 wounds, leadership 6, and objective control 2. Compared with their previous profile, they used to move 14 inches. I guess quite a few bikes have dropped down to 12, though they have also lost a wound as well, going from 5 down to 4, and didn't gain any toughness along with either the Terminators or the standard Custodians on foot, so have kind of lost a bit of durability where most other things have gone up a touch. Some things will wound them a little bit easier, say anti-tank las cannons that went up to strength 12 rather than strength 9. In combat they fight with their interceptor lances, 5 attacks at strength 7, AP -2 and damage 2. Unsurprisingly they have the lance keyword which gives them +1 to wound on the charge, again really quite nice and generalist, and they've had a bit more of a trade-off from the standard Custodian Guard, +1 attack but they also lost 1 AP. Against low save things or high invul save things they'll be a bit better. Against very high armor save things, like say a 2+ save Sanguinary Guard, they'll be worse. Perhaps on balance I'd go for them being very slightly better than they used to be. Unfortunately though, it does look like their ranged attack has been taken down a peg. Both weapons toned down a fair bit. The salvo launcher is now a single shot at 24 inches as it was before, but rather than being the devastating AP4 and damage D3+3 shot that it was, it's now just a single shot at strength 9, AP2 and damage 3. Seems a little bit lackluster to be honest. I feel like it's really toning down the range firepower that Custodians had. Out of the plastic models at least, this was one of their only decent options for strong range shooting. The Hurricane Bolter has also lost a few things as well. It's now only 18-inch range rather than 24. And unlike the datasheets that we've seen on the Space Marine Codex, it only gets 3 attacks base, and then up to 6 attacks within rapid fire range, though it does have twin links to reroll the wound roll. Again, it is a fairly solid tone down compared with what it was before. It's definitely a lot better to have 12 shots at 12-inch range, rather than 6 at 9 and rerolling wounds. Finally, for their special rules, they've got a combination of 2 different buffs. Turbo Boost allows them to advance a flat 6 inches. That's one that we've already seen on the Space Marine Bikers, and then they can combine it with a rule called Quicksilver Execution, where if they advance, then they can move over an enemy unit, and for each biker in your squad you roll a d6, or a 2+ they deal 2 mortal wounds. Basically, as for a squad of 3 bikers, you'd expect around about either 4 or 6 mortal wounds. Rolling lower than that will be a bit on the unlucky side. They can only do that move once per game. I guess it could be quite reliable to try and finish off a unit that's got a high invul save or something like that, but unless there's some sort of rule that allows them to advance and charge or advance and shoot, just feels like it might be a bit situational compared with either just moving normally and shooting and charging your target. I guess you could perhaps combine it with killing an enemy unit and moving over onto an objective. That might seem kind of reasonable. It definitely seems like a fun rule. I feel like it's just hard to pass up the big charge. Overall, broadly, I feel like they might have been toned down at least a little bit. Wouldn't be too surprised to see a slightly lower points cost than where they are at the moment as a result. They're still going to be a very intimidating prospect though. Strength 7 attacks with +1 to wound are still going to threaten just about everything in the game. Moving on, we've got the Custodian's Blade Champion. He's got Infantry, Character, Leader and Deep Strike. From just the one side of the data card, we don't know which unit he can lead yet, though I'd guess it would probably just be Custodian Guard and perhaps Wardens. Would seem unlikely to be able to join Terminators to me. Statline wise, he moves 6 inches, has a toughness of 6 and a 2+ save with a 4+ invul, 6 wounds, leadership 6 and objective control 2. I guess perhaps the biggest change for that one is that his save is boosted to a 2+ from a 3+. Previously, he did stick out a little bit by having a saving throw that was worse than everything else in Games Workshop's range for the army, even if it did mirror the Venatari Custodians from Forge World, which his armour looks kind of similar to. Otherwise, he's up to toughness 6 and has lost 1 wound. In combat, his Vault Swords still seem to have a decent choice of 3 different attack profiles, all hitting on a 2+. As before, it's a bit of a theme between having the choice of killing characters, dealing damage to hordes, or dealing damage to heavier things. Even at best though, he doesn't really look like he's going to be an anti-tank monster, though this could certainly do a number on enemy Terminators. The anti-character mode is 6 attacks at strength 7, AP 2 and damage 2 with the precision keyword, basically similar to a Guardian Spear that can snipe characters. The Hurricanist profile is the anti-infantry one, 9 attacks at strength 5, AP -1 and damage 1 with sustained hits 1. That's the one to go for against toughness 3 or 4 things with bad saves and 1 wound, I suppose. And then finally he's got his Victus profile for anti-elites, 5 attacks at strength 6, AP 3 and damage 3, and devastating wounds if you happen to luck out with a 6 to wound. That looks like it will go through Space Marines and Terminators quite nicely. Probably the best against heavy things as well, given the damage 3 and the mortals. In general, he's just going to be a very flexible damage dealer who's going to amp up the combat power of the squad. Talking of which, he does actually do a bit more in terms of buffing units now. Previously, he used to help out with charges a little bit, and that still seems to be the case. He gets to reroll advance and charge rolls while leading a unit. That's very nice just in itself, particularly with Guardian Spears about, but also once per game he can also advance and charge as well. That means that the unit that he's leading, if it's got a 6-inch move, would average around about a 19-inch threat range given the above rerolls. Pretty scary stuff, and he could have some on-foot golden armoured infantry moving across the board very, very quickly. Quite nice for a big damage dealing turn with a squad with a whole bunch of Guardian Spears as well. You could advance them, fire off the Guardian Spears as their assault weapons, maybe fire them twice if they're Custodian Guard, and then get stuck into the enemy. Finally, as we've seen with a fair few champions, he's also got a 0 CP heroic intervention stratagem, and he can use this one if other units have done so as well. I feel like that one's going to be relevant for Custodians more than most. It's the one where you can sort of reactively countercharge another unit nearby. Often, at least in 9th edition, Custodians units often want to be slogging up the board in small units of infantry, and having the power to easily support each other against an enemy charge is really quite a big deal. You might be able to handle 1 squad of Golden Boys, but quite possibly not 2 of them, plus a Blade Champion. Overall, at least from this, he is looking really quite interesting. Getting Custodians into combat's quite a big deal, and he certainly looks like he amps up the threat range by quite a long way. And of course, once he gets there, he certainly adds to the squad's melee prowess, being able to pick the right blade for the job. Finally, for the leaks, we've also got the Custodian Wardens as well. For the most part on their base datasheet, they seem kind of similar to the regular Custodian Guard. They're infantry with Deep Strike and Martial Qatar, though they don't have battle lines, so you can't take quite as many should you wish to. Their stat line's basically the same now. It does seem that they've lost their permanent Feel No Pain, and in terms of their weapon damage, if they're armed with Guardian Spears, they're basically the same. They both get 5 attacks now, though previously the Wardens had 1 extra compared with the Custodian Guard. Besides the special rules and battle line, it looks like the only major difference is the choice of war gear they have. The Wardens can't take the Sentinel Blades and Spears, but they can swap out the Guardian Spear for the Castellan Axe if they want to. 4 attacks at strength 9, AP -1 and damage 3, hitting on 3+. Unfortunately, I do think the two are kind of badly balanced. Damage 3 is definitely nice to have and will be a little bit better against certain targets, but both losing an attack, AP, and the excellent 2+ hit roll really just takes most of the goodness out of that efficiency. unless there's some other way of making them specifically better by, say, getting extra AP from a stratagem or something like that. It just feels like they're directly inferior to the spears. The interesting things about the Wardens, though, are their special rules which seem to focus on durability here, and also bodyguarding one key character. They've got a rather nice durability buff. When they're hit by a weapon that's strength is greater than their toughness of 6, the attacks from that weapon get -1 to its wound roll. Basically everything that's wounding them on a 3+ normally will be wounding them on a 4+ instead, and things like las cannons wounding them on a 2+ will only wound on a 3. Really quite nice, that one, I think, given that most of the weapons that are efficient against Custodians tend to be anti-tank guns with high strength, AP and damage. On top of that, also looks like they get a durability boost for a single phase once per game. You can basically just choose the time when you think that they're most likely to die and make them surprisingly hard to kill. You do have to trigger this one at the start of the phase though, you can't do it reactively to the enemy shooting. Again, I feel like that one's just a little bit on the awkward side timing wise. It means that you might have to trigger this rule and then your opponent just chooses to shoot something else completely. Or I feel like there will be situations where your opponent starts attacking something and then the Custodians player says, oh wait, can I try and use this rule? It is quite powerful though, I guess you just need to judge it right on the actual turn where they are going to be taking some major damage. Finally, here's just a reminder of the Allarus Custodians datasheet that Games Workshop showed us the other day, along with the Custodian Guard, Wardens and Vertus Praetors pretty much rounding out the main Custodian battle line in plastic. They are looking really quite tough and chunky. A big toughness 7's going to keep them safe from a lot of small arms. They've got fairly solid anti-infantry with a shooting phase, with a surprising amount of shots out of that ballista's grenade launcher now. And then their two special rules are re-rolling wound rolls against characters, monsters and vehicles. Really quite general purpose, considering that characters joining squads should give them the keywords to trigger those rerolls, and they also get a once per game teleport redeploy from Golden Light. That could be quite disruptive if your opponent thinks that they're out of the game because they're too far away. They disappear at the end of your opponent's turn and reappear in your reinforcement step. Overall, they certainly look pretty solid. Hopefully the various different custodian units will continue to have a bit of a niche within the army. I feel like the way that they've got it in 9th edition, they've managed to make a role for most of the plastic squads. Hopefully that continues to be the case. So anyway, let me know your thoughts on the new Custodes rules. Obviously without points, kind of difficult to weigh up the units. In terms of actual value in game though, looks like the Vertus Praetors have maybe been taken down a peg, whereas the Custodian Guard are perhaps looking more dangerous than ever, gained a pip of toughness alongside some big rerolls and firing twice, plus just the 5 attack base profile of the Guardian Spear is a lot more intimidating than 3. The Blade Champion looks particularly interesting for getting them there as well. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, or I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. I do tend to post new ones just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description below if you'd like to help support. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.